My sister whispered, "You should stay out of my business." When I caught her stealing from our parents. So I gathered evidence and confronted her in front of the whole family. I never thought I'd find myself in this mess, honestly. If anyone had told me that my own sister, Naomi, would be the one to break our family apart, I'd have laughed. It's strange, the people we grow up with, the ones who know us better than anyone else, they're the ones who can shock us the most. It's like they hold a mirror up to our lives and show us parts of ourselves, parts of our family, that we'd rather not see. It was the Thanksgiving from hell that set everything off. My husband Craig and I were driving up from Chicago to Milwaukee with our two boys, Robbie and Jack, packed into the backseat. Craig and I had barely been on speaking terms for the past week, money was tight, work was stressful, and, well, life just wasn't easy. The boys were already whining, asking how much longer, and my patience was wearing thin. I glanced over at Craig, who had one hand on the wheel, the other tapping rhythmically on his knee. He could sense my mood, I'm sure of it. "Look, Lil, let's try to enjoy today, all right?" Craig finally said, breaking the silence. "Your parents look forward to this all year." "Yeah," I sighed, rubbing my temples. "It's just. With everything going on, it feels like I'm holding the world together by a thread. And don't even get me started on Naomi." He smirked. "Oh, come on. She's harmless." I looked at him sideways. "You think Naomi's harmless? Did you forget how she conveniently borrowed money from us 3 Christmases in a row and forgot to pay us back?" Craig let out a chuckle. "All right, you got me there. But maybe this year's different." The drive felt longer than usual, and by the time we pulled up to my parents' modest brick house in the suburbs, I was ready for a drink. My mom, Patricia, greeted us at the door with her usual warm smile and a tight hug. "Oh, Lily, look at you. And those boys. They're getting so big," she exclaimed, hugging my boys until they were squirming to get free. My dad, Henry, was busy in the kitchen, which was his happy place. He'd been perfecting the art of roasting turkey for over 40 years and wasn't about to let anyone help him now. He gave me a firm handshake, which he seemed to think was appropriate for father-daughter greetings, and then clapped Craig on the back with a hearty, "How's that new job treating you, son?" I scanned the room, looking for Naomi. And, of course, there she was, late as always. She waltzed in a half hour after us, dressed in some new designer outfit that screamed money. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, her makeup flawless, and her handbag, well, it was the kind of bag I couldn't afford even if I worked double shifts for the next 6 months. Naomi gave me a big smile and a long, tight hug that felt almost staged. "Lily. You look. Well, you look so. I don't know, cozy." "Thanks, Naomi," I said, my tone flat. We went through the usual Thanksgiving motions, laughing, reminiscing about old times, listening to my dad tell the same stories we'd heard 1,000 times. But I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. Naomi was unusually chatty that day, and a little too enthusiastic. It wasn't like her. She'd always been the free spirit, the one who couldn't care less about family traditions, yet here she was, clinging to Mom's arm, telling us all about her plans to finally open her boutique. "Yeah, I've been working on this forever," Naomi was saying, her eyes wide with excitement. "I found this perfect spot downtown, right by the lake. You should see the place, Lily. It's going to be stunning." "Wow, that sounds expensive," I said, trying to sound supportive but not sure I pulled it off. "Oh, it is," she laughed, a little too loud, "but you know, when you believe in something, you find a way." Craig raised his eyebrows at me, and I knew what he was thinking. We'd both been wondering where Naomi was suddenly getting all this money. Last I'd heard, she was barely scraping by, working a string of part-time jobs. But now she had designer clothes, a fancy bag, and enough cash to open a boutique? After dinner, when everyone else had settled into the living room with dessert, Naomi cornered me in the kitchen. "Hey, can I talk to you about something?" she whispered, glancing around. I folded my arms. "Sure. Look," she said, leaning in close, "I know things haven't been great between us. And I know you think I'm, like, irresponsible or whatever." "I never said that," I replied, though a part of me knew she wasn't wrong. She sighed, her gaze shifting uncomfortably. "Well, anyway, I just wanted to tell you that I'm really close to getting my store off the ground. I just need a little more. Like, a small boost." "Naomi," I said, already exasperated. "We've been through this. I don't have money lying around. Craig and I are barely keeping up as it is." She pursed her lips, that hurt look in her eyes. "Oh, of course. Never mind. Forget I asked." I could see she was disappointed, but I didn't feel like I owed her anything. She'd made choices, and so had I. We were adults now. The next few weeks were uneventful, or so I thought. But just as Christmas was approaching, my mom called me, her voice shaky. "Lily, honey, could you help me with something?" she asked, her voice tinged with an edge of panic. "Sure, Mom, what's wrong?" She hesitated before continuing. "Your dad and I. We're noticing some strange transactions on our bank statements. We can't quite figure it out. Strange how? Well, she said, barely audible, there have been withdrawals we don't remember making. Transfers to another account. But neither your dad nor I authorized them. Have you talked to the bank? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady even though my heart was racing. Yes, but they're saying it's someone who had access to our account. I don't understand it, Lily. We never gave anyone else our information. At least, I don't think we did. I felt a chill run down my spine. My parents were old-fashioned, and they'd trusted Naomi and me with so much over the years. Could she have? No. It couldn't be. I tried to shake off the thought, but something in my gut wouldn't let it go. Later that night, I confided in Craig. Do you think Naomi could be? I trailed off, the words too horrible to say out loud. Craig sighed, leaning back in his chair. I don't know, Lil. She's made some bad choices, sure. But stealing from your parents? That's low, even for her. But think about it, I pressed. She's suddenly got all this money. And she's been so evasive about where it's coming from. Craig shrugged. Maybe. But if you're really that worried, why don't you dig a little deeper? Talk to your parents again, see if there's a way to check those transactions. And that's exactly what I did. Over the next few days, I played detective, pretending to help my parents sort through their finances. I went over the statements with my mom, finding a pattern. The withdrawals were small at first, barely noticeable, but they were increasing over time. Each one corresponded to a period when Naomi had made big life changes, a new car, that expensive coat, and now, the boutique. I felt sick to my stomach. There was no denying it anymore. Finally, I confronted Naomi. I called her up and asked her to meet me at our favorite coffee shop downtown. I hoped, desperately, that there was an explanation. Anything that could make this whole mess disappear. When she walked in, she looked radiant, dressed in a brand new coat that cost more than our monthly mortgage. I tried to keep my anger in check as she flashed me her usual charming smile. Lily, you're looking a little tense, she said, sitting down across from me. Cut the crap, Naomi, I snapped. We need to talk about Mom and Dad. Her smile vanished. What about them? They're missing money, Naomi. Large amounts of it. And it just so happens that every time something new appears in your life, more money goes missing from their account. Care to explain? Naomi's face went pale, but she quickly put on a defiant expression. I have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, don't play dumb with me, I hissed, leaning in close so no one else could hear. I went through their bank statements, Naomi. I know you've been taking from them. I know you've been using Mom and Dad's money to fund your boutique dreams. Naomi's eyes flashed, and for a moment, I thought she might actually hit me. Instead, she leaned in and whispered, her voice dripping with venom, you should stay out of my business, Lily. Just stay out. What the hell, Naomi? I whispered back, stunned. They're our parents. They've done everything for us. How could you do this to them? She rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. You don't get it. You've never gotten it. You've always had this perfect little life, with Craig and the boys and your safe little job. I've been struggling my whole life, trying to make something of myself, trying to be somebody. And they were never going to help me the way they helped you. I stared at her, speechless. What are you talking about? They've helped you so many times, and you know it. Not like they helped you, she spat, her face twisting with resentment. You were always the golden child, the one they could count on. I was the screw-up. They never believed in me, not. Really? So I took what I needed to finally make something of myself. And you're just mad because you can't stand to see me succeed. Is that really how you see this? I asked, my voice breaking. Naomi, this isn't about success. This is about betrayal. You stole from them. Our parents. Don't you care about anyone but yourself? She stood up abruptly, her eyes blazing. You think you're so perfect, don't you, Lily? Well, newsflash, your little detective act doesn't make you better than me. You're just bitter. Bitter because I'm doing something with my life, and you're stuck in that boring little box you call a life. With that, she stormed out, leaving me sitting there, humiliated and furious. The drive back to Milwaukee that Christmas Eve was the longest drive of my life. Craig held my hand the whole way, saying nothing, just letting me cry. When we finally got to my parents' house, I knew what I had to do. After we'd finished Christmas dinner, when everyone was settled in the living room, I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. I have something to say, I announced, my voice trembling but strong. Everyone turned to look at me. My parents looked confused, Craig looked worried, and Naomi. Naomi glared at me, her jaw tight. Mom, Dad. You've been wondering where all that missing money went, I began, taking a deep breath. Well, I know where it went. Naomi's been taking it. The room fell silent. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, and my father's face turned red with shock. Naomi shot up from her chair. This is ridiculous. Are you seriously accusing me in front of everyone? Do you know how insane you sound? Yes, I am accusing you, I replied, my voice steady. Because I have proof. I went through the bank statements. The money that's been disappearing? It lines up exactly with your sudden expenses. The designer clothes, the car, the boutique. Naomi laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh, of course, perfect little Lily, always the favorite, always looking for a way to make me look like the bad guy. You made yourself look like the bad guy, Naomi, I said, barely holding back my anger. Mom and Dad trusted you, and you betrayed them. My mother broke down in tears, and my father looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Naomi didn't say another word. She grabbed her coat, shot me a look of pure hatred, and walked out. We haven't spoken since. After that Christmas Eve, it was as if Naomi had just evaporated from our lives. She left town, didn't answer my calls, texts, or emails. I tried reaching out a few times, hoping she'd at least come clean, maybe even apologize, but she was like a ghost. I'd hear from old friends or distant relatives that she'd been spotted in Chicago or Minneapolis, sometimes flaunting expensive bags, other times scraping by on whatever part-time work she could find. She'd cut us off completely, but the damage she left behind lingered. My parents were devastated. My mom, always the soft-hearted one, took it the hardest. She'd never thought one of her daughters would do something like this. It was a betrayal of the deepest kind, and she aged years over the following months. My dad tried to keep strong, putting on a brave face, but I could see the hurt in his eyes whenever Naomi's name was mentioned. Months passed, and life slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after that. My parents tightened their finances, added extra security to their accounts, and I helped them set up a budget that didn't leave any room for sudden expenses. We were cautious, more guarded, and that trust that used to come so easily was gone, leaving a dull ache in all of us. But then, one evening in early October, nearly a year after that fateful Christmas, something unexpected happened. I was scrolling through my Facebook feed when a message popped up in my inbox. It was from an old friend of Naomi's, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Hey Lily, I know things went south with Naomi, but I thought you should know she's back in Milwaukee. She's been asking around for help. I think she's in trouble. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Naomi was back? And she needed help? Part of me wanted to ignore it, pretend I hadn't seen the message. After everything she'd done, she didn't deserve a second of my time. But curiosity got the better of me, and I typed back a quick reply, asking for details. Within minutes, my friend responded. She's been staying at that rundown motel on 12th Street. Last I heard, she's been trying to set up some kind of consulting business from there. She's in bad shape, Lily. Real bad. I bit my lip, torn between anger and pity. But mostly, I felt a sense of justice. Naomi was in trouble, and it was all because of her own choices. She'd pushed away everyone who'd ever cared about her, betrayed the people who loved her most, and now she was facing the consequences. I decided, right then and there, that if she wanted to face us again, it wouldn't be on her terms. This time, I'd make sure the truth came out in full. The next day, I called my parents and told them the news. Lily, my mom said, her voice shaking. Do you think she'll want to come back? I don't know, Mom, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. But maybe it's time we get some closure. She owes you an explanation, if nothing else. My dad was silent for a moment before he let out a long sigh. If she's willing to come back and apologize, we can talk. But no more chances, Lily. No more handouts. That Friday evening, I drove over to the motel on 12th Street, heart pounding as I knocked on the flimsy door of room 24. The sound of muffled footsteps shuffled from behind the door, and then it creaked open. There she was, looking nothing like the sister I'd once known. Her once shiny hair was limp, her face gaunt, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. She looked older, worn down, and for a brief second, I felt a pang of pity. Lily, she said, a weak smile playing on her chapped lips. Didn't expect to see you here. Naomi, I replied, my tone cold. We need to talk. I've spoken to Mom and Dad, and they're willing to meet. But this time, you're going to own up to everything. Every single lie. Otherwise, you can forget about family. Her face twisted in a mixture of anger and fear. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just trying to get back on my feet. Enough, Naomi, I snapped, not willing to play her games anymore. You stole from our parents. You betrayed them, and me, and everyone who ever loved you. If you think you can just waltz back into our lives without an ounce of remorse, you're sorely mistaken. She looked away, her eyes darting to the peeling wallpaper, as if she could avoid facing the truth. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I'm giving you one last chance to make things right, I continued. You come to Mom and Dad's tomorrow, and you tell them the truth. All of it. Otherwise, I'll make sure everyone knows what you did. And I mean everyone, your old friends, our relatives, even the boutique owners in town. You'll never be able to hide from it. Her face went pale. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something real in her eyes, fear, maybe, or shame. She knew I wasn't bluffing. "All right," she whispered. "I'll come." The next day, we gathered at my parents' house. Naomi arrived looking nervous, clutching her purse like it was a lifeline. My parents sat across from her, their faces a mixture of hurt and anticipation. I stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching as Naomi shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Finally, my mom spoke, her voice trembling. "Naomi, we loved you. We trusted you. And you took everything we worked for. Why?" Naomi looked down, silent for a long time.
Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, I thought I deserved it.
"I thought. If I had enough, if I just made something of myself, I'd be worth something to you. I was tired of feeling like the disappointment." My dad let out a heavy sigh. "You were never a disappointment, Naomi. We just wanted you to be honest with us. To make something of yourself, yes, but not at the cost of your integrity. Not by hurting the people who love you most." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. She'd made her choices, and now she was facing the fallout. But then my dad surprised me. "We're willing to forgive you," he said, his voice steady. "But only if you repay every cent you took. You'll work for it, Naomi. You'll earn our trust back, dollar by dollar. If you can't do that, then this is the last time you'll hear from us." Naomi looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief. She seemed ready to argue, but something in my dad's gaze stopped her. She nodded slowly, swallowing hard. I'll do it," she murmured. "I'll pay you back. Every cent." And that was it. We set up a plan. Naomi would move back to Milwaukee and work under my dad's supervision, helping with odd jobs and taking on work wherever she could find it. She'd send a portion of her earnings directly to my parents every month, with no exceptions. And if she failed to hold up her end of the deal, she'd be cut off for good. Over the next year, Naomi struggled, but she did her best to meet her obligations. She worked double shifts, picked up odd jobs, even delivered food late into the night. She complained at first, grumbled about how it wasn't fair, but she soon realized there was no other option. She had to rebuild her life from the ground up, and she had no one to rely on but herself. As the months passed, I began to see a change in her. She wasn't the sister I'd once known, nor was she the person who had betrayed us. She was something new, someone who understood the consequences of her actions, who knew the weight of trust and the price of forgiveness. One evening, nearly 2 years after that fateful Christmas, Naomi and I sat together in my parents' living room, sipping coffee in silence. She looked at me, her eyes softer, wiser. "Thank you, Lily," she said quietly. "For not letting me get away with it. For making me face what I did." I nodded, finally allowing myself to let go of the anger that had festered for so long. "We're family, Naomi. But family means honesty. I just hope you remember that from now on." She nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "I won't forget it. Not this time." In the end, Naomi's punishment wasn't just the work or the debt she owed, it was the long, painful journey of reclaiming her place in the family she'd once betrayed. She learned the hard way that trust, once broken, is never easily restored. But in that hard-won journey, she found a new strength, a new humility. And maybe, just maybe, so did I.